Barron Trump had always been fascinated by history, but he never imagined that one day he would experience it firsthand. It all started when his school hired a new history teacher, Miss Evelyn Carter. She was different from any other teacher. Her knowledge was so deep, so precise, that it felt as if she had been there during the events she described. She spoke of battles with the clarity of a soldier who had fought in them, of revolutions with the passion of someone who had witnessed them firsthand. At first, Barron thought she was just an incredibly skilled historian, but strange things kept happening in her class. She would often pause mid-sentence, as if remembering something, then continue with details that weren't in any textbook. She never used notes, never referred to a book, yet she knew more than any historian he had ever read about. One day, Miss Carter assigned the class a research project on the fall of the Roman Empire. Barron, eager to impress her, stayed late in the library, searching for the most obscure details he could find. As he flipped through an ancient text, he felt a presence behind him. Turning around, he saw Miss Carter watching him with a knowing smile. "You're looking for something that no book can tell you," she said. Barron was startled but intrigued. "How do you know that?" "Because I know where to find the real answers," she replied. "But you have to trust me." Curiosity overwhelmed him. He followed her through the empty corridors of the school, down a staircase he had never noticed before. At the bottom, a massive oak door stood, locked with an iron mechanism. Miss Carter took out an old pocket watch, pressed a small button on its side, and suddenly the lock clicked open. The door creaked as she pushed it, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with ancient artifacts, scrolls, and books that looked older than the school itself. "This," she said, "is where history lives." Barron stepped inside, mesmerized. The room felt different, almost alive. Before he could ask questions, Miss Carter held up the pocket watch and whispered something in Latin. The air around them shimmered, and in an instant, everything changed. They were no longer in the chamber. They were standing in the middle of a bustling Roman city. The smell of baked bread, the sound of merchants haggling, and the sight of soldiers in shining armor surrounded them. Barron's breath caught in his throat. This is impossible," he stammered. Miss Carter smiled. "Welcome to ancient Rome." They walked through the streets, passing grand villas, massive statues, and marketplaces filled with exotic goods. Barron watched as senators debated in the forum, as architects sketched plans for new structures, as gladiators trained for their next fight. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. "But how?" Barron finally asked. "I'm a timekeeper," Miss Carter explained. "I have the ability to travel through time, to witness history firsthand, but I cannot change it. I can only observe." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you have potential," she said. "History is more than dates and facts. It is the story of humanity, of decisions, of triumphs and failures. Most people see it as something dead, something locked in books. But you see it as something alive. And it is." They spent what felt like hours in Rome. Miss Carter took him to the Colosseum, where thousands of spectators cheered as gladiators fought for their lives. She led him to a hidden library where scrolls contained knowledge lost to time. She even let him listen in on a secret meeting of senators, discussing the fate of the empire. But just as he was beginning to understand the depth of this world, Miss Carter looked at her watch. "It's time to go." Before he could protest, she pressed the button again, and the world dissolved around them. The next moment, they were back in the chamber, as if nothing had happened. Barron staggered, his mind reeling. "That was real," he whispered. Miss Carter nodded. "But you must never tell anyone." "Why not?" "Because knowledge like this is dangerous. If the wrong people knew, history itself could be rewritten." Barron understood. From that day on, he looked at history not as something distant and abstract, but as something living, something fragile, something that needed to be preserved. He continued his studies with a newfound passion, always wondering if one day Miss Carter would take him on another journey. And as for Miss Carter, she continued to teach, always watching, always waiting, always knowing more than she let on, because history was not just her subject, it was her life.